Hey guys, I'm back with the ninth part with Kassra Zargaran here as my guest in Lübeck. And I had announced in a big way that we would do a day in the life of a Hell's Angel. We'll postpone that for now to continue with the biography. I believe that's a better fit, but it won't be forgotten and will still occur. Yeah, new day. Kassra also went to the barber.
Yeah, a bit refreshed.
So I look like always, and yeah, we left off a bit. You were saying you became a member now. Berlin was split up, newly founded, maybe also because of certain procedural errors by the investigative authorities during the ban, that they left that door open. And yeah, now you're a member, you join, and somehow notice, okay, the rules that were so strongly preached by them. You always talk about an inner circle. So basically, people who actually control everything that's going on. Now you're a member, and somehow you feel like I'm somehow in control now,
Nothing at all.
but not really.
It was like a structure within a structure. So actually, most of it was just film material. Combat personnel, meaning soldiers, financial security for the club. Club dues are paid by every prospect, hangaround, and member, which is a crucial aspect of the club's funding.
And what was really shocking was simply not knowing what's in the club's funds.
Exactly, and I didn't know that until the incident. There was a brief comment once about how much was still in there. Harty, our group's treasurer at the time, briefly mentioned in a meme that only around 12,000 euros remained. But I never really knew over the years what was going on, how much was coming in. And of course, there were also outstanding amounts from various people, including me. But what the club's financial assets are and what financial obligations the club has, wherever they may be, I never knew.
And what's amazing is that outwardly it's always claimed one man, one vote.
Yes, of course.
But here, somehow,
Democratic and all that. I don't know if you know the recording where Frank Hannibal is in court in Spain and says that people are really proud that it's a direct democracy. So I had to turn that off at some point too, because that's just so, well, what can I even say about that? It's a criminal organization, and calling that democratic is really funny. The idea itself is nice, but context matters. It's like the mafia, they're also organized democratically. That means this commission, the Five Families Commission, they vote on whether someone gets killed or not. That's always the question. There are always democratic decisions about actions outside the law and murders. That's always how it is. That's how it is, yeah, I don't know. That's like a rape with love. There is no rape with love or loving rape. That's kind of paradoxical, perfidious, and yes, it's just a perversion. That's why I always find it hilarious. But since you're knowledgeable, it's easy to counter it with arguments and expose the nonsense. And that's putting it nicely.
you're a member now, and you travel a lot in Germany. You mentioned Denmark, Scandinavia, that was the case. What's it like now? So the first weeks of membership just go by like that. You earn your money through certain companies,
Yes, we had some construction companies.
but that was all legal.
Yes, all tax money too. Don't worry, everything was handled according to the rule of law with the public prosecutor, so no worries. Yes, of course it was legal, the companies were legal, but of course these were construction contracts, so there were kickbacks, under the table payments, no invoices were written.
But how should we imagine that? Did you organize some assistants or helpers?
Exactly, we did. I got to know a contractor, he's no longer around, and he gave us those kinds of jobs under the table. Go over there, take care of the construction site, I'll put you in charge. You'll be the foreman, but also be there on site, make sure the materials are delivered properly, make sure the workers do their job, things like that. I was really sitting there like in that show, The Sopranos.
Yeah, like in a sun lounger.
Yeah, that's really how it was. I was sitting in that construction trailer and just sat there. The boss ordered me to check if everything was working. I kept coming and going, ate my food while the people were working, and then left again. That's really how you can imagine it. So it was a really laid-back story, and I earned my money. For me, that was great too, because financially I was able to, great in context back then, yeah, important because it allowed me to get back on my feet financially. I was completely drained, and the first 2 years were extremely difficult for me, so it was a good opportunity for me to rebuild myself, and that's exactly what I did.
At that time, what were your main issues when you were a member? You mentioned briefly that there were always some overlaps with certain Berlin clans. I don't know to what extent you can mention them or anything like that, or if there were any fixed agreements. That's a big question for a lot of people. Okay, is a city divided up like that? Is it really clear who controls which street or neighborhood, or who runs which business? How should we imagine it? Do you actually meet up with gangs or clans, sit together and divide things up? Or is the city divided up like that?
We were definitely in the north up to Wittenau. Reinickendorf, Wertingen was our territory, that's clear. And everything else, Neukölln and other directions, let's just say. Other districts, the Abu Shekers were very well known back then, and even today the colleague himself, Arafat, has confirmed that he had an exchange with Kadir, whatever that was about. In any case, there were very close connections. I've already commented on that before. And we were very, very good with them, especially with Nasser and Arafat back then. Kadir and Ramos we were good with back then, but it was always kind of a truce, you know. Of course, these are all groups that have their own territory in certain districts or areas, and it's always the case that everyone has their own corner, and no one tries to go into someone else's corner, and if they do, of course, war breaks out. And here and there we had situations where, for example, there was someone from an Arab clan in Wittenau, especially Märkisches Viertel, known from Sido. Sido grew up there, and there were runners for one of our guys, members, and then they got competition from other runners. They were from a member of an Arab clan, and we knew him. And right away there were warnings, or rather, there was a conversation. Hey, we need to talk about this. There are runners from you here. What's going on? This is our sub-territory. You can't just put your people here and take all our customers. And then we met at a cafe, discussed things just normal, and then found an agreement. So they moved on to another area where it was okay and fine for everyone. And of course, there are agreements, there are divisions. There isn't a map where you open it up and say, hey, that's your area. It just happens naturally. It all happens in the process. Many have been around for a long time, so you couldn't get rid of us. That means we were a relevant party back then during that time. That has also changed, fortunately, by now. As a result, they couldn't simply disregard us and proceed without considering our perspective. So the districts are divided. There are people in every corner doing their own thing. Back then, Kurfürstenstraße was also run by a large Arab family, also a well-known figure in the scene. For instance, the family's head was an informant. Later, he was exposed as an informant through police and court records. So it's already very complex, very diverse, and at the end of the day, also very criminal in some parts.
If we take a look into your charter, how should I imagine that? There are always people put forward on the internet who then go on television or sit on YouTube and say, yeah, crime, no, I just work on motorcycles, or I have a normal job, like working shifts or something like that. How was it with you guys? Did you also have people who had a regular 9 to 5 job?
Well, there were two people with us who had a 9 to 5 job, if that's what you mean. One was a roofer, the other was a gas and water installer. That was our treasurer back then, and one member with us was also a roofer. But apart from that, none of us had a steady job, as they say. Everyone made their money on the street or earned it illegally and had no professional obligations in terms of being employed.
I imagine it must have been difficult to be a roofer when everyone else was somehow involved in the scene.
Yeah, of course, it was always very strange, especially economically. It was always a bit... However, for us, it always evened out. We were, as I told you before, we weren't a financially strong charter. We were a war charter, and that means, yeah, only the basics had to be there, and the top ranks made a bit of money, and the rest just kind of messed around. And you just had to make sure everyone did their own thing, or sometimes someone would throw you a bone, like charity. Later, people would use that against you, saying you can't handle things and always need handouts. These people are often very hypocritical. And that was really, really strange, almost cringe, as people say today, because one of them would come home from work and come in with his clothes and say, yeah, I have to get up early tomorrow and all that, and the other one too, and it was like two worlds colliding, but still it worked out between the two of them.
What were the areas of activity of BIS?
Selling drugs, prostitution, collecting money, protection money, not like you might imagine, where someone goes and says, hey, this is our turf, you pay us money, but rather you're already well known in the scene. You know, in those kinds of structures, something always comes up. Kadir always said that too. When you're at the club, something always comes up. I still remember we were on the ferry from Rostock to Denmark. And that's really true. When you're in those kinds of circles, there are always people making money illegally somehow, whether it's untaxed money, some kebab shop, companies, whatever. And for example, there was a roofing company. The owner had problems with his partner, and somehow none of it was really 100% legal, kind of half illegal, and he wanted to get rid of him, but he couldn't do it legally. And he was also afraid of him because he always walked around with a taser and stuff. Then Kadir was there and went over again. He had some talks with the guy and so on. Money was regularly given as a token of appreciation. He had to give him one or two more cars, an ML, a C63, and then he could drive them for himself. Then he got another nice real boost of a 5-figure amount, and then regularly got a share here and there and things like that. That's just how it is. In Berlin, there are a lot of criminal businesses being conducted. It's not always so rosy there in the city, especially in the city. And from there, there are always people who earn their money illegally, untaxed, only declare 50% of their income for their businesses, but they don't always manage to do that. And then you have a partner, for example, who says, you have to give something, you can help me. Then we get in, they pay then. But it's not like in Naples where you go in and say, hey, signore, protection or whatever, and pay up, or else I'll blow the place up and beat you half to death. That just doesn't happen here because then you'll end up in prison very quickly.
The state criminal police are just waiting for that?
Yes, of course.
There's even a proper shoe for that?
Yeah, sure. We once had a situation where there was a car dealer and a supporter was involved in the story, and he somehow got into a conflict with him. Then a member of ours who was later convicted for the act as well went there and felt blackmailed. He went there once, and the second time, the special task force was waiting around the corner and arrested him right away for half a year in custody. Later, it turned out that it wasn't as bad as he had made it out to be, but things like that can happen really fast.
Yeah, that's of course, sometimes we help get someone out of a situation, but maybe it's also input for people to have a learning effect. Like sometimes I've been asked a few times, like, I have problems with the store or something else.
During your active time?
No, even now I still get messages from people saying they have this or that concern. I always say, don't go to the local police, go straight to the state criminal investigation office or something like that. So not to the small local police officer here. I don't mean to speak badly of him, but that's not his field.
I was just about to say, they don't have the experience to deal with such issues. And then they unconsciously make mistakes that make it really hard for the victim to...
That's why you should go directly to the state criminal police office.
Yes.
I'd like to address that because some people don't understand when others ask for help to collect money.
Yes, well said. Very well said.
And what I've also often experienced is that they end up in an almost lifelong dependency. Yes, you make a pact with the devil. People often think that when they ask for help, you'll provide a solution for a fixed price and then it's done. However, it's usually not that simple, right?
It's never like that, because where the money is, people stick around like shit. That's how it is. And because they... in the end, you have to imagine it, also for the viewers out there, the people who approach such structures or such people are not really honest people themselves. That means honest people. That means they themselves have earned money illegally or have something to hide, and that's why they can't go to court with a lawyer and file a civil lawsuit or go to the police, because they feel threatened. And the only way out is through such structures or such people. And by doing that, you open the door and also make it transparent what kind of money, what kind of cash flow is happening there. And these people, which I was one of back then, and you too, are just focused on the money. At the end of the day, it's a business. It's the motorcycle clubs, especially the motorcycle club scene, among the 1%ers. Let's leave out the regular guys on purpose. It's a business. When you join the club, it's immediately about money. You have to pay the club and everyone else. Most people, everyone wants to make money in their own way. Of course, there are also one or two solid, let's say, for the viewers, solid means normally working guys who are in the clubs. But otherwise, that's 0.01%. And the rest are, of course, eager to make quick money. And accordingly, if you're not an honest businessman, if you open the doors and gates and make things transparent, you also have to show what kind of turnover is being made. Then people get a taste for it and think, man, he can't do anything anyway. Now I've got the hook in, and now I'm biting down on you and you can't do anything.
Yeah, and you think I helped you.
I helped you, and who do you want to go to? You need me, and now I've got my foot in the door, and then you'll be drained dry. The cow will be milked until it eventually collapses. And therefore, I can only recommend to everyone, stay away from it, don't get help from people like that. We live in Germany, a country governed by the rule of law. The police, who are professionals and know what they're doing, are responsible for upholding this. As Philip mentioned, it's best to directly approach the specialized departments such as the State Criminal Police Office and criminal investigators. They are true professionals in this field, it's their job, and they know how to handle it. As I said, a patrol officer mainly does field work and other things, but in cases like this, especially when it comes to redacting names, victims, not making victims out of people afterwards, not making addresses public and things like that, just to avoid exposing yourself to any additional reprisals. It's a deal with the devil. Once you're in, you're just waiting for the day to end and you can't escape.
You're a relatively new member now. A lot has happened. Bans, new foundations, and so on. You've also had your first experiences, and maybe things didn't turn out the way you expected, at least not when it comes to having a say. And how will things continue in the club now? Will there be more disappointments, or is there a new sense of momentum, or how is it looking?
No, it's very complex. You have to imagine, I'm also the kind of guy who always speaks his mind, literally. And if something doesn't suit me, I say it. I did that there as well, which often backfired on me in relationships. As a result, I portrayed myself negatively, particularly to Kadir Padir.
But about what did you speak up?
Well, for example, someone once offered me a job working at the door or something like that. So I said, yeah, all right. And then they said, yeah, go ahead, do it again. And I said, I don't want to, I have my own income now. Yeah, so you think you're better now. Who do you think you are? I can earn my own money. Then he said, oh, that's how we noticed. That's why we slipped you something. It's like, how dare you? You say, hey, watch how you talk and all that.
But that's not friendship. Those aren't brothers.
Of course, those aren't friendships, no brotherhood. Of course not. Philip, I'm going to skip ahead for a moment. There were phone recordings in the trial, but I'm going to skip again now because it just fits here. The president, that is Kadir Padir, said on the phone, he was arrested during the incident, let's just call it D-Day, and even while in custody, they still had phones. And on the phone, an officer said, there are 3 or 4 people who still matter to me. I don't give a damn about the rest. With people like that, with a person like that, leading a charter and the others are supposed to walk through fire for them, and that already used to. Exactly 20 years and preferably not making any demands and 50 euros a month or whatever. That's just beyond good and evil. That's why I skipped ahead a bit, but it just fits so well because it was always like that. Looking back, it was never any different. Just later on, as it happens, you become ideologized.
You didn't want to see it.
You have blinders on, all this vanity, all this power that comes with it, this whole package, it shines so strongly. And of course, here and there you also have economic advantages, and at the end of the day, you're an opportunist and take advantage of it, even if it later turns out to be a disadvantage. And there were so many actions. There was a former friend of the group, I think also of Kadir Padir himself and of other guys from the charter whose father died. We went there, and during that time, one of our prospects ran away, quickly grabbed his motorcycle and took off. As a hang-around, I was unaware and didn't know about it. He knew that Kadir was coming now and would kick him out because he messed up somehow. It was obvious that he would kick him out quickly now. And I still remember I was sitting in the courtyard. The renowned clubhouse on Residenzstrasse had a large courtyard where all the bikes were parked. And I was sitting there keeping an eye on things and doing a bit of cleaning up, and then he came running in. Hey, Perser, can you help me out for a second? I said, what's up? Yeah, my bike and stuff. I told him to wait as I was just at the stairs and would come down in a second. He said, no, it's okay, wait, I'll do it myself. He pulled it out, started it, went out, left the door open, and drove away. I never saw him again, even though he lived just a few streets behind the club. I never saw him again. He had 2 or 3 brothers. After he ran away, Kadir and Sergeant Evo came asking repeatedly where Mustafa was, saying they were going to mess him up. I told him I didn't know what happened. He asked if the other person took his motorcycle, and I confirmed he did. He repeatedly says it's messed up, calling someone a little punk and more. He was gone then, and they said he got kicked out because he messed up, he said, or did something that wasn't good for the club. I still don't really know what it was. What I'm getting at is he had a few brothers, and those brothers were also at the funeral a few weeks later, and we were there too. We're discussing the honor, dignity, and decency that most people have in such situations. Even other groups wouldn't do that. But that was the case here. They ran into the brothers, and of course the brothers also have their pride and were street guys too. So the situation was like this. The coffin was carried in, everything was prepared, and then everyone was in the courtyard at the front of the mosque. There was a verbal exchange, and then a mass brawl broke out. And to this day, I was there myself. It was so shameful and so undignified, and I think, yeah,
But that's not moral at all anymore.
no, it's completely without morals, and it's just, there are really no words for it.
Because let me put it this way, even many criminals I've met, even extremists, were able to behave themselves at certain events or occasions. You knew this isn't going to happen here. First of all, it's a religious place where it simply doesn't belong anyway. There are maybe women in front of the mosque, a bit separated. A mosque is a bit different, but there are children and so on.
It's generally a holy place for religious people who practice this faith, Muslims, whether it's a synagogue or also Christians. It's a holy place for people. It's more or less a place of neutrality. You go there, you find faith, and then you leave, or you have a funeral or whatever, but that's it.
And is there no one who says, Kadir, not here, not here?
I don't even know if he provoked it.
No.
You don't know who did what or how, but it should never have come to that.
No, I didn't want to pin that on him. That's not what I meant, but someone has to say something. You can sense when violence is imminent. The tension in the air is palpable. You feel the tension.
Yeah, people come in, you see that, okay, and that's where someone should have intervened and said, listen up, guys, we're going there. It could be that they'll show up. If they do, everyone stays calm, shake hands. And that's it. No one talks to each other, and that's the end of it. The thing gets done, it's neutral ground, and then you leave. And everything else happens outside on the street. You know that from before, too. That's in the culture I grew up in, or rather in this culture, this criminal culture. Well, it's not really a culture, but let's just call it that for now. These pseudo-attitudes or pseudo-morals that are shown there mean that whenever there's a conflict and you want to have a conversation to resolve it, anyone who's invited as a guest to this situation, especially in the Middle East, which is where my parents, my father, come from, and I know it too. The moment someone is at the place or at the house of the person of that party in the conflict, you meet there, nothing will happen. You are a guest, and even if you argue, from the moment you walk out the door and leave, and you see each other again another time, then you can take action. That's the legitimization, but never in the house at the moment when you have brought him in as a guest. But that has happened too. I have experienced that as well. Someone was brought in for a conversation. We were in the Sahara, just to describe the situation briefly. And that's the breaking point. Our living room was violated when, in the middle of a conversation, he suddenly struck with a real punch, slap, or fist. It escalated into a major commotion. Those are things that shouldn't have happened, even with that street mentality, but it did happen, it took place. And that just shows that even the self-imposed moral, let's just call it that, moral compass didn't work there at all, and it was just nonsense.
It was also disappointing when the Hamburg Hells Angels attended one of our parties. And we had a guest with whom they somehow had beef in Hamburg, and not even it was about paying money. They had tried to blackmail him once, and then when he got out of the car in our driveway, he was beaten up, which really disappointed us. There was a huge discussion about whether there should be an internal punishment for him. and so on. And I thought, okay, that's our guest. We invited him. We were unaware of the situation, and it's inappropriate to behave that way in someone else's living room.
That's disrespectful to the other person and not allowed in general. You're not respecting him because you're on his territory. It's the same when you, let's say now I have a problem with Mehmet and we want to sort it out. I say, okay, look, we'll settle this. Come to my house, into the living room, sit down. Then you sit there, even if you don't come to an agreement and say, we haven't found a solution here. The next time I see you, I will attack you. And then I tell him that, and then he leaves, and nothing should happen to him on his way home. Those are these self-made rules, but you know it yourself. They also mention incidents of people getting shot at home, even with their families present. I've witnessed a former member in Potsdam having his apartment shot at while living there with his wife and child. I've seen it all. At the end of the day, it's a culture without rules, without real rules.
Exactly.
Without decency, even the self-imposed rules and respect, attitudes are not experienced, are not lived, because at the end of the day, it's completely depraved, you know what I mean? And there are social norms about how you should behave in public and also towards people, usually, and they can't even manage that sometimes, so how are they supposed to live by their own rules, you know?
I want to address a topic that people from the community have already asked about. You yourself are Muslim? Yes, alhamdulillah, yes.
Not the best, I always try my best, but I believe in God and I belong to the Islamic religion.
Well, I'm an atheist, not even an agnostic.
Being an atheist is also religion.
Yeah, well, I do feel close to Buddhism and I respect people no matter what their faith is. I think it's good when it gives support, and what you just said, I think that's really good. Well, you don't have to be perfect, but you can try to do your best for yourself. I think that's worth a lot in my life.
Yes, of course.
Because I'm not without faults, even in my new life. Well, I could bring Marisa in now. She could talk for half an hour about my faults.
Yes, of course, I'm not that either. And that has to be made very clear. Even the people who get overly moralistic in the comments and have their own opinions, whatever they may be. None of us is without sin. None of us is without sin. We were born flawed. In our religion, it's said we were created that way, and that's how we are now as well. That's why, as the Germans say, you have to fight your inner bastard. Always go against it. Be disciplined. Pull yourself together, and also resist your own urges, like when you feel like, oh, I'd really like to give that jerk a piece of my mind, but you say no, you don't do that because that's not right. So you turn around and walk away, or treating someone in the lowest way or degrading them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but what I wanted to get at was you were probably a lot of Muslims in the charter. And that's one thing. I mean, that question really came up a lot, and people said, okay, well, I've experienced that too. Of course, we also made sure to have a lot of halal food for our guests so that everyone could be accommodated. And I found that really interesting sometimes. And now when I hear, someone calls themselves a Muslim, they're in a 1% club, they live in the red light district, they deal drugs, they're violent, they try to oppress people, they lie, cheat, scheme, and then they lose it over a currywurst.
That was good. You're preaching to the choir, Saki. Many people, not just the wealthy, feel connected to Islam even today. I don't want to act superior to them either. Everyone has to account for their own actions at the end of the day on their own balance sheet, which they'll have to settle somehow with their pluses and minuses when they eventually die. That's what we say about ourselves. I still find it difficult, as you pointed out. I've experienced this myself quite often. During the day you lie, you cheat on your wife, you cheat on your kids, you make your money, even if you don't call yourself a pimp. Yeah, like, why? I only get paid by the brothel owner. At the end of the day, it's dirty money, it comes from that corner, it's just self-justification and hypocritical to justify it to yourself. Then you do things like coke, you smoke weed, you smoke all that, you don't pray, you don't do Ramadan, all that, you don't go to the mosque, nothing. You treat religion like it doesn't even exist, and then suddenly you keep saying Wallah or I swear on the Quran or whatever, which is also messed up. And I just think, but then if you go somewhere, this person, and they're with someone who, for example, does all these things, but then says for themselves, I'm weak, I like to eat currywurst, a pork sausage, and then eats it. Then this person with all those things I just listed before says, what are you then? Are you not a Muslim? Do you eat pork? Oh, bro, are you kidding me? Do you understand what I mean? And that's just people, that kind of person. That's what it is. It's self exposing. You don't even need to say anything more about it. And anyone with a bit of cognitive ability and an open mind can see, wow, I think you're still at the very beginning. I think you have completely different issues you need to sort out for yourself first. And that's why, yeah, it's really, really difficult. And all this online hate and agitation. By now, there are all these internet preachers, and not all of them, I don't want to lump them all together, but I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. I think such content doesn't belong online. That's a private matter. Some people have made that choice.
I feel the same way.
And then, of course, you also have people who manage to get out of these short-term structures. And then they say Bismillah and Alhamdulillah, I swear to God, and this and that. And then they sit there, and 3 sentences later you hear, this son of a bitch, or this guy, or this piece of shit, and I'm going to destroy him. This time I want to, they don't even realize what kind of world they're in, and that everything is completely upside down, that the whole perpetrator-victim thing is totally reversed. And so that's what makes it's hypocritical and completely messed up. And I'm glad that I made that switch and was able to turn things around for myself, and that I see it that way now and completely distance myself from it and don't want to have anything to do with it. And I don't want people like that in my circle either. Thanks to the people in my life, both positive and negative, I now have the life experience and sensitive antennae to quickly recognize when it's time to say goodbye and leave. My wife says I sometimes come across as very arrogant and tells me not to be that way. I say no.
That's what life has made of me.
Life has made me this way as a form of self-protection. I quickly notice when someone close to me in my already limited circle has a negative impact on me. You know it. Sort it out immediately. Ultimately, negativity breeds more negativity. People should be aware of this and avoid negative individuals. Only let people into your life who help you move forward, whether it's on a personal level or who have a positive influence on you in some way, and don't drag you down, because those kinds of people are toxic and do more damage than you think. Speaking from experience, it's always good. Then it's better to be alone.
Spending time alone is a great skill anyway, and everyone should just try it sometime. Yeah, okay, life goes on. So even these incidents now at the club, and for me, there's still the question, I mean, you still have a life together, so what do you do? Do you ever go bowling together, play paintball? I don't know.
Yeah, we used to go to the movies together from time to time for a while. And UCI, you probably know it too. It's a big movie theater chain in Berlin. That's what we did. We often went out to eat together, always with a big group. Well, since we had mandatory attendance and Kadir was keen on bringing Danish culture to us because we had a very close connection to the Danish Hells Angels, especially to the nomads back then in Copenhagen. So the old guard back then, nowadays it's completely different. That wasn't just a weekend lifestyle, it extended beyond that. Unlike other chapters, this was life for us, complete dedication, presence, and being there. The club was top priority. Even on family day, if trouble arose, you had to drop everything and come immediately. That was the routine. So we were always on the move, we traveled a lot, we ate together, spent time together. And that's the thing, a person can't pretend forever, especially when you're together in a small space for a long time. Sooner or later, their true character comes out, and you see things in people where you think, okay, that's not what you told me last week. Or, okay, last week everything was cool, and now suddenly you're acting like judge, jury, and executioner all at once,
Yeah, I actually wanted to start here with a question again, but I forgot.
Yeah, you can do it now. You can still do it now.
What would your former club brothers say about you, about your character weaknesses and your problems, if I was sitting here with them now, which I don't want to do, so please don't make that request? Yeah, same for me. I think that's pretty clear. I only want to deal with people who have a new mindset, who have turned their lives around and really mean it. But what would they say about Kassra? God, in terms of character, wow, this and that, what do you think? Even back then, it's not like they would say, yeah, now he's a key witness and just call him an asshole.
Got it. Yeah, exactly, like a spaz idiot asshole. He's here in person, acting like a total badass. That's how they would say it. Just to be clear, I'm not excluding myself from that time, of course. I was just as much of a jerk. I had to be, to fit in there at all. And of course, I walked around there too, was an asshole, was also a main character, did my things, and acted like a wild boar towards people. But for me, it was always like this. In the end, I was very much on my own and always tried not to have any commitments to others and to do my own thing alone. Also to separate my business from the club, because I saw what happens when you're not in such a good situation in the club and how quickly the rug can be pulled out from under your feet.
Yeah, then everything is gone.
Everything's gone, and I was also threatened with that. That's why I already left.
But I'll ask again.
But of course, I still acted like an asshole.
Yeah, maybe I...
And of course, I also spoke the way they spoke.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit too superficial for me.
Yes.
But maybe we can go a bit deeper into that. What would you say? Yeah, I'll just throw something out there that I see. Wow, he also tried to manipulate me or lied at some point, was a liar. Or, well, I can give an example. For instance, I think some people would say about me that I was too bossy, I decided everything, I manipulated. I bent the rules to suit myself. Those are, I think, the kinds of things that come my way. There will probably be more to come, but...
You were part of the structure, and while it didn't improve the structure, it made you worse, just as it did to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no different for me. I'm sure some people have issues with me too.
Yeah, and what?
And issues like, he has issues and says he was like this and like that, he was like this and like that. Whether that's true or not is another matter.
Exactly, it's not about the truth.
Yeah, I can't do that. I never got any feedback. The only feedback I ever got, and I was always I had a very positive relationship, except with Kadir and one or two managers. I had a very good relationship with that one. And I found that out later as well. There was a phone surveillance where someone from the management team was on the phone with Kadir. We had a bit of a disagreement with him. We had disagreements and we even confronted each other publicly. Someone had to step in between us. I also had a conflict with Kadir, which we can discuss later. Several, and one really intense one that ended up permanently ruining everything. Anyway, a call where he says, hey, we need to talk to the Persian guy. That guy is getting on my nerves and stuff. And then Kadir says, yeah, he's getting on my nerves too. He annoys me. Something needs to happen about this and so on. The other guy on the phone says, yeah, but what are we supposed to do? The guys respect him. They love him. We can't just do anything. How are we supposed to explain that to the guys? He then says to Kadir, are you kidding me? The guys forgot who I am. I'm the club. This is my charter. I decide who comes in here. But whatever, he says. I'm on the road in southern Germany. We'll handle it when I'm back. He has to go eventually. Then the call ended. It's admissible telecommunications surveillance in court. And that was the only real feedback I ever got about where I stand with the club.
That's honest feedback.
Yeah, it couldn't be more honest. And from that, I see that I didn't have such a bad standing among the members, but just with the leadership.
But that's... okay, you found that out afterwards.
Yes.
But that must have been a constant dance on eggshells for you guys in the charter.
It's okay, it depends.
Or in phases.
Well, it depends on what kind of character and type you were. If you were a guy who was there, who was present, who did a lot for the club, just someone who was always around at the club, then you weren't really seen as someone who tried to get in negatively or drew negative attention. That only happened if it was someone who wasn't around much. Also, if you were involved financially.
Who commented?
No, not even someone who commented, not at all. Just someone who simply wasn't around. Then people would look and think, okay, what's up with him? What's going on there? Then they'd always look for something to trigger him a bit, to go after him. Or you're a person who questions things and asks how they work, even confronting authorities on behalf of others. But for the average person, it's really about initiating conversations and discussing issues, like asking for clarification about a trip and saying, what's going on here? for example, or someone who just isn't liked because, those are very specific types of characters. That's not a boys' club there. Those are very specific characters with a very specific mindset, with very specific intentions and motivations for why they're in these structures. Those characters are all very cunning, especially in the charter where I was as well. This means nothing was granted to anyone, not even the dirt beneath their nails. Everyone wanted to make their own buck somehow. As the president, he was surrounded by his young supporters who always agreed with him, saying things like, "Yes, Kadir," and "Yes, my Kadir," acting as yes men. And when new people joined, they never made it into this structure.
Sure, of course.
But if they did their own thing, and one of them thought, I don't like his face, but I'll play along, for example, there were one or two people I couldn't stand at all, and I knew that he couldn't stand me either. You could feel that, but you still acted. I later discovered this through telecommunications surveillance, revealing the immense envy and resentment people feel when someone makes money. That's all just natural, not much even has to happen. And that was the case for me in particular. At some point, I kind of played myself out through various situations, from Kadir's perspective, because I just didn't feel like dealing with him anymore after seeing what was going on and what kind of people were actually running and shaping the whole charter however they wanted.
As a last question for this part, was that even possible for you guys? When I think back to my old days and the other charters or chapters I knew, no matter which big clubs, was it possible to just say, look, Kadir, I need to talk to you. Let's sit down here, have some tea, and listen. I think this and that is messed up or isn't working. Why did you do it like that? Were conversations like that possible?
Not everyone. There used to be one person capable of doing that. That was the vice president, Bulent at the time. He could do that. He held Kadir back. He was the sole person he regarded as his equal. The rest were 85% yes men in communication, unwilling to even discuss it and just wanting to move on. No, we're doing it like this and that, this and that. That was a dictatorship. The site lacks content and consulting activities.
That can't reach the people.
Yes, the people around me made their money. That did reach the people because they were just opportunists and said, I'll participate. He decides, everything's fine. They just subordinated themselves. Those were people who found their way in such a hierarchical structure.
But everyone has an issue at some point?
Of course, topics were discussed, but he made the decisions the way he wanted to. There was no discussion to understand what was going on with Kadir or to address any issues.
But did you vote?
No, during the years when I was a member, and even before that, I never voted for anything. There was a time when they asked from the east, like in East Berlin, Marzahn and that area, there was a bouncer crew or a bouncer gang or whatever you want to call it. A few guys there had potential for Kadir. I didn't know them before. They were involved in the East Berlin red light scene, including pimps. They spent time with us and eventually expressed their desire to become Red Devils during a meeting at Grisha Vau's place on Streustrasse. Vau is a well-known former bandido, for those familiar with him. And we were in that charter. The charter had already switched over to the Hells Angels, Potsdam. And so we went to the clubhouse and had a meeting there. And that was the only time anyone asked who was in favor of us becoming the Red Devils. Kadir and the sergeant raised their hands in support. You must stand firm in your opposition and not minimize your stance. Then you immediately, you can do that in that moment, but you know how it is. If you make a decision against the president, he feels his authority is being questioned, like, what, I was the one leading this. Now you're voting against me? All right, buddy. I'll screw you over next time. You'll see. That's how it was. People were well aware of it. That's a power structure. Even if you had the option to vote, you wouldn't have voted against it. Why? Because that's just how it was. And that's why. Because it was the way it was. And I experienced it myself. We had a situation, maybe we can talk about it later, or maybe just touch on it briefly. I just gave him some good advice, for example. In the car, it was about his affair back then.
Tell it.
Yeah, sure. Back then, Aygun Muchuk was still alive, and at that time, we still had a good relationship with him. He was also still a member at West End. We drove down to his region where he lived. He had rented a location there, and we were invited for dinner. And then we drove there. Selim, me, Kadir, and Bülent, vice president, a member, and the two of us. We drove there. At the time, Kadir was having an affair. And they were kind of in the middle of a bitter breakup. It was like a bitter breakup. The relationship was toxic and unhealthy, with constant back and forth. And he really wanted her to somehow get something to keep her busy. Before that, she worked as a prostitute in a brothel at Artemis. Then she quit there and needed something to do. Kadir asked Bülent for an idea, who was heavily involved in the construction business and was the vice president at the time before being kicked out. He came a few weeks later and got kicked out. And he asks him, man, in the car, we were driving, he says, Bülent, who is she to you? Let's say her. Can't you find her a job? Get her something at your office so she can do some tasks. She's bored. She needs something. She has to have something to do. She needs to earn money and all that. He says, hey, don't be mad at me, my friend. But with her story, the way she acts, I can't allow that. This is a serious company. These are employees, and I can't afford the kind of drama you two have, the way she behaves. That won't work. That's not possible.
You have to protect that too.
He's partnered and has partners, as he didn't build this up alone. This means he's also dependent, and because of that, it simply doesn't work, regardless of current business relationships. Kadir then said not to worry about it, as she has changed. He explained that she was desperate, overwhelmed, and alone, but now things have improved. And back then, from the brother who drove, Salim and I both had an affair going on, which also wasn't right, but that's how it was back then. And we both of us had contact with her. And then then he says, yeah, no, but why don't you ask Salim? He then told Salim to share how she was doing. And of course he said, no, everything's fine, she has changed and all that. It was a shame and she was alone, but she's pulled herself together now and so on. He mentioned her involvement with the Persian's old man. He suggested asking the Persian if everything was okay. What do you mean? And of course, in my understanding of honesty, I said, look, don't be mad at me, Kadir, but I don't get it anyway. She's caused so much trouble now. I mean, your wife lives 3 houses down with 2 kids. This is doomed to fail. If she's causing drama after just a few weeks or months, imagine how it will be as the relationship deepens and progresses. That can only end badly. Focus on your wife and just let it go. Afterward, it was deemed an insult to Her Majesty. He insulted me, tried to reach forward, got himself all worked up, so he was really right at the limit. Accordingly, I also got really worked up, had to hold myself back, and honestly, for a moment I thought about attacking him, because he really insulted me badly, and I won't repeat what he said. And back then, Bülent was there, and you could already tell that he was always the calming influence, like he was always the one saying, come on, calm down now. And he stepped in, put his hand on the driver's headrest and said, hey, that's enough, it's good, that's enough, Kadir, that's enough. And he said some Turkish insults. And that was a moment, that was a turning point for me.
For nothing, right?
For absolutely nothing.
We're talking about absolutely nothing?
Because of nothing. And that's why I want that, and we'll get to that later, because there was a follow-up conversation. Since we also talked about discussions, we can talk about that and so on.
Yeah, but I mean, we're brothers, we're on the road, somehow we're sitting in the car.
We're loyal and all that.
Respect, loyalty, and that's really a trivial question.
I'd go to jail for you, and yeah.
That's a trivial question.
Of course, no, that's just an honest answer, a well-meant piece of advice. I know a brother and a friend can't always just say yes and amen to everything.
But a brother, that's something different.
Of course, sure, he just didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I annoyed him because for months I was always saying something and doing my own thing business-wise. They always said, oh, you think you're better than us and stuff like that. I didn't let them participate much. They always claimed to know my partner, but when I talked to him, he said he didn't even know them. He's just talking crap. So of course it was clear to me, for me it was obvious that it's a shark tank. Especially the top shark didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and that's when the mask completely fell off. He mentioned things I had discussed with him when I was transferring, saying, yeah, you're going to Hamburg, I can let you go. Those Hamburg guys, they screw around and stuff. I thought to myself, okay, that's the level we're at now. Oh, wow. I thought, wow, yeah.
Is that a threat?
Yes, of course. Yeah, sure, he threatened me, of course. And how and what kind of threat? Not just him personally, but he threatened me and communicated a situation back then that he knew at the time that I didn't want anything to do with the Hamburg guys. It wasn't working. And he was like, yeah, the Hamburg guys are trash. There's no point with them and so on. They're working with some people who testified. They're informants. He knew that, but he didn't care. We just say hi to them and that's it. And then later he himself was very close with this Dario, for example, and that's what he told me. And yeah, you talked badly about the Hamburg guys too. I can't help it. They're screwing you and so on. You have to imagine I'm sitting there, I'm a member, fully tattooed from the Hells Angels here and whatever, sitting there, went to Berlin to see him, and then that man crazy, and you say something like that to me, I'm thinking, okay, all right. And for me it was clear, okay, that's it. And the mask had already fallen off once, then he put it back on just to put it figuratively for the viewers, and I ignored it, and
I have to end this part now.
yeah, sure.
Now you get out of the car.
The problem was that was still on the way there. It was a really nasty situation. Yeah, we drove from Berlin to Frankfurt. That's almost 5 hours. And we had already been in the car for almost 3 hours in my car, and it was really awesome. What are you doing?
Yeah, great, nice. And then what do you do? Turn on 90s pop to lift the mood.
Nothing at all. I was on the phone on my iPhone 4. Back then there was still the iPhone 4, and the guys only spoke Turkish, so I was persona non grata, and they really made me feel it. They only spoke Turkish. We then went out to eat, and the only one who was still a bit nice to me was Selim back then. And he said, come on, screw it. He said, it doesn't matter, forget it now, forget it now.
Couldn't someone there just swallow their pride and apologize, saying it was nothing? They just got worked up due to having a bad day and personal issues?
Nope.
No one could?
No, that's an admission of weakness.
That's a strength. It's a strength to say, bro, I was wrong.
That's really important for people like that.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Really important. For people like that, when they, especially him in his position, he would have never apologized. That would be extremely difficult. He's the president, he does everything right. And he can do everything, and his life is the best, and that's exactly how he's always communicated it. It was a nasty situation. We can discuss it briefly in the next part.
We'll do that in a moment.
It's a shame the second conversation fits your description, but shouldn't be shared to avoid withholding information from people.
We'll do that in the next part, Kassra. Thank you very much. Time really flies here. I hope it's the same for you, whether you're listening or watching. So Kassra, thank you very much. Toddy is behind the camera again today. Thanks for your effort too. Thanks for watching. Like, dislike, and comment below. Shout out to all channel members and viewers. Check out Kassra's book, The Persian, linked below. As always, signing off with an ahoy from the coast.